Okay, this is ProCamera. It's my go-to app. And if we look at the interface, if we look at the three dots to the left of the camera icon, press that, it brings up the options for shooting. And if you click on the three dots to the right, we can now see the options available, those that we have to pay a little bit more for, and this can be ordered in any order that you prefer. Okay, so we are in the photo mode, and if I then drag the blue square and the yellow circle around, this allows me to control focus and exposure. And if I tap on either, this will lock focus and exposure, and I can tap again to readjust. You can also select the EV mode at the top. This allows you to adjust the exposure value, and if you click to the left for the time or shutter speed, or to the right for the ISO, we can adjust those independently. Watch out for any warnings such as the red zebra stripes or numbers highlighted in red. These mean that you will need to adjust your settings accordingly. So the EB button is for exposure bracketing. This means you can take a number of shots at varying different exposure values. And here I've taken 3 shots, each at slightly different exposures. And if we view a couple of these, you can see the difference that we have. And this is great if you're not quite sure what you're doing. So you've got a number of the same shot at different exposure values. If you press the 1x in the middle, this will enable you to zoom in 2 times, or you can slide to zoom up to 7 times. And the white balance function enables you to control your temperature from the blue spectrum through to the yellow or warm spectrum, from cool to warm, and the tint from green to magenta. So you can fine tune your white balance. If you press the grid icon bottom right, you can bring up a menu of options, which includes rapid fire. Rapid fire is great for continuous full resolution shooting. FE lock to lock focus and exposure. We looked at that right at the very beginning. Grids enable you to bring up some guides to aid composition. The tilt meter is great for landscapes where you need to get things level or plumb. Shooting modes include automatic mode, manual mode. I recommend this for full manual control. And shutter and ISO priority mode, SI. Auto perspective correct enables you to line up any keystoning in an image automatically. The histogram enables you to view your exposure using a histogram at the top of the viewfinder. Aspect ratio is useful for if you know the aspect ratio for your output, However, be mindful of the fact that if you do use a different aspect ratio, such as square, you're going to be cropping your image in the camera, and you can't get this information back afterwards. Formats include JPEG, which is uncompressed, high efficiency image format, which again is compressed. It's the new version of JPEG. TIFF, which is uncompressed and uses a large file size. And RAW, which is uncompressed and unprocessed, and is best if you want to go and do some post-processing. There's a self-timer function, which is useful when your phone is fixed in a tripod. And also anti-shake, which waits for the device to be still before taking a shot. On-screen display modes. Essentially, you can choose between standard, medium, and light to show more or less of the shooting options currently in use. If you press settings in the bottom left of the screen, this brings up some options for you to be able to adapt the app to your own preferences. You can change the file formats, length of a timer, how many shots you use for exposure, bracketing, etc., etc. I'm going to take a couple of shots. You can see once a shot is processed, you can see it in the bottom left, and here we can see in the viewfinder. So ProCamera also has some functionality to be able to edit your images in the app. There's some useful features. I'm just going to quickly scroll through here now. However, I prefer to use a different app. We'll look at that a little bit later. I'm just going to quickly look at the video options. So if I select the video option there, what's important to know is this is orientated incorrectly, and we need to turn our camera around to the landscape orientation. This is because the video editing software works in a linear way. Okay, so whilst this is still looking upright, you can see that all the settings in the image has turned round. And this is recommended whenever you're shooting video. You need to turn your camera around so it's in the landscape format. If you don't do this, when you come to edit your images, you will end up with the software adding a black mat around the image, which looks similar to what you're looking at now. The video app has some nice functions available, such as zoom, white balance, and exposure control, and you can decide on your frame rate and output options too. So let's take a look at Afterlight. This is my go-to editing app, and if we click on the app, we can bring up our camera roll where we can view all our images. Or if you click at the bottom here, you can bring up any folder on your device, and even folders that have been shared with you. And I actually use Dropbox as my file sharing folder. So I'm going to select on an image here and bring that up, and it gives you the option to either go back or to use the image. With an image selected, you can see the tools across the bottom, and if I click on the adjustments, which are the three lines, I want to highlight the gear icon, and this brings up a menu of all the tools. You can click to the right of these on the two lines and drag these in any order you wish. I prefer to use the tools that I use most to be at the beginning of the menu. When you select a tool, in this case exposure, you can drag the slider down to -100 and then up to +100, and this seems to be the scale for most tools. So exposure will adjust the overall exposure. Temperature will adjust the temperature from cool daylight to warm tungsten and anywhere in between. Contrast adds or removes contrast from the scene, so you can create a bit more texture through a form of lighting control. Structure enables you to remove or increase edge detail, and if we zoom in we can see the effect there and how that works on the sliding scale. This for me is much better than clarity or sharpening. Brightness enables you to lower or increase the mid-tone brightness. Shadows enable you to add some fill or more drama to the shadow areas. And highlights enables you to kind of remove any hot spots or increase the highlight brightness. The curves is useful, so if you are used to using curves, this can affect the whole kind of tonal range of an image. And you can work through the 3 color channels of red, green and blue to create a kind of filter effect, or just to fine tune your image with some precision. So those are the tools that I use mainly. There are many others. Also, I would like to bring your attention to the selective saturation that enables you to remove or increase the saturation of any given color. So if we move along from the adjustments, you can see that there are a number of preset options that you can scroll through. So this is much like the Instagram filters that you're probably really familiar with. And you can select any of these and you can increase or decrease the effect between 0 and 100%. You can also create your own fusion filters based on any settings that you use. The touch tools are useful for local adjustments. You can increase or decrease the brush size using the slider scale. And here you can just work on an area of the image, in this case to lighten, if I remove that, or to darken some areas of the image to add kind of more definition. So these are worth exploring, and it really depends on the image that you want to work on. The next option along allows for some creative effects such as dust or light, which brings in the light leak effect that can work for some images. There is also a color shift or chroma. This is not for the faint-hearted, but you regularly see it on some Instagram posts. And there's double exposure, so if you want to overlay more than one image. You can type in some text using the type tool, and this can be scaled and moved and placed. You can also change the font size, the font color, the font type, and the opacity. And you can remove this should it not be to your liking. Using the crop options, you can rotate your image should you need. You can flip horizontally and vertically. You can straighten your image to ensure that you get your line straight should you need. And you can skew, and again this is useful particularly if you've got kind of flat geometric artwork such as sketchbooks that you need to straighten up a little. And then finally, the crop tool, you have a number of aspect ratios that you can choose, or you can use the free crop tool or the original, which crops at the aspect ratio that the image was shot on by your device's camera, and you can drag the corners just to scale. So once you've completed your adjustments, you can save. I would always select the largest image size possible. You can save as a fusion filter, as we mentioned earlier, and there are a number of frame options and colors should you wish to include those. You can also save to your social media channels. So once saved, this will go to your camera roll. And should you wish to check out afterlight.co, there are plenty of tips and tricks that you can find there.